Okay, Boker Tov. So we're continuing our study within the Amida, and I think it's very appropriate that we're going to read the Beracha of Ala Sadiqim, talking about the righteous people on the day such as today, Yom HaShoah VeHaGevurah, the day of Holocaust remembrance and strength, because we're going to talk a little bit about people who die al Kiddush Hashem, people who give up their lives, sacrifice of their lives for the sanctity of God's name. That's going to come up in this beracha, and then maybe we'll share just an idea that we could take away for ourselves for this very important day. Al Sadiqim ve'al hasidim. So after we talked about in the previous beracha the wicked, the evil people, laminim ve'lamalshinim, and we said that they shouldn't have hope, and Hashem should uproot them, and Hashem should destroy them and get rid of them, and that we should rid the world of evil. We contrast that now in the next beracha, talking about how we also need, it's not enough to just remove evil, it has to be filled with good. Whenever there's a void, that void has to be filled with righteousness, with justice, with good people, right? The absence of bad does not necessarily equal good. So that's why David HaMelech says, Sur Mera, separate from evil, but then Aseh Tov, then you have to do good. So now we offer a prayer to Hashem to honor and to assist all of the righteous people in bringing that goodness to the world. So ala sadiqim ve ala hasidim, on the righteous people and on the pious people. Let's just pause there for just a minute. What's the difference between being a sadiq and being a hasid? What does it mean to be someone who's righteous versus someone who's pious? What's the difference between that? They're something of synonyms for each other, but there's always a slight difference between those types of words. So there's a lot of different answers that could potentially be offered. I'll share with you the approach of the son of the Rambam. The son of the Rambam, Rabbeinu Avraham ben Harambam, in his book Hamaspik le'ovdei Hashem, the guide to serving God, he writes the following. He says, someone who is a Sadiq is someone who follows everything to the letter of the law. He abides by every mitzvah. He obeys every single halakha. He does the mitzvot in accordance with the letter of the law. And that, he says, is already a monumental level. How many of us can say that we follow every single law and every single mitzvah in its straightest and most approved way, right? Not too many of us, right? So to be a Sadiq, he says, is to be somebody who's on the level that you follow everything. You understand and you obey everything. He says to be someone who's a Hasid is someone who takes the laws of the Torah and takes them a step further, who bumps them up a higher level. He says, just like the Torah does not want me to eat some unkosher food, it also wants me to stay away from food in general. In other words, not to fast every day, but to sort of take the lesson of there's certain foods that are bad for me. Now I have to enhance it by also staying away even from kosher food, which is detrimental to my health, which is indulgent, which is all about flavor and taste and things like that, which connects me to Olam Hazeh. So a Hasid, a Sadiq says, this is the law. Don't eat pork, don't eat this, make sure you stay away from that food. Follows everything to the T. The Hasid says, I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to deepen my observance by even staying away from the things that are permissible to me, but that from a philosophical and characteristic perspective are not what the Torah wants from me. Does that make sense? Right? That's Hasidut, taking it even a step further to an even further extreme. Additionally, Hasidut could be a person plunging the depths from an intellectual perspective, right? From understanding a Sadiq as somebody who obeys everything, but may not understand why he's doing everything, but follows it to the letter of the law. The Hasid then deepens his understanding and his performance of the mitzvot by plunging the depths of what the reasoning is behind every single mitzvah. So to be a Sadiq and a Hasid is amazing, but a Hasid has a slightly higher level than a Sadiq. So to the righteous and to the pious, and to the remnants of the nation of the house of Israel, and upon their elders. Elders over here can have a number of different meanings. What does it mean that we're praying for the elders? So, Judaism gives a lot of respect to those who have age and life experience. When someone reaches the age of 70, the Torah says, that a person has to rise in front of somebody who is elderly. Doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be a Torah scholar and a brilliant individual in his mind. Just having experienced life and being blessed to go through a length of days is a big feat and is important, is something that Judaism respects. So one interpretation of ziknehim could literally mean the elders, that Hashem should protect those who have life experience, those who are up in years, because the Torah values that. The youth can only learn from observing and watching and picking the brains of those who are older. People who have strong grandparents. Unfortunately, myself, 3 out of my 4 grandparents had passed away before I was even born, so I wasn't privileged to have that. But my one grandmother, who I did know very well, Doc knew her very well as well, we learned so much from her, right? Just from watching her, from observing her, from being with her. Grandchildren learn so much from their grandparents. And so people who grow up with a family structure in which they're close to their grandparents, in which they see life experience and wisdom from people who may not necessarily be book smart, but are life smart, are worldly people, that's something that the Torah very much values. And it's something that unfortunately in the society around us is not very much valued today. I've had this conversation many times. Danny Masri and I have had it many times, that the society today is all about youth. It's all about looking young, feeling young, being young. We take the old elderly and we put them in homes and we separate them, and we don't want to, nobody wants to be around old. Old is like, out, forget about you, right? When athletes get old, next, we move on, right? There's very little respect in our society for the elderly, right? For what they could bring to us in terms of ethical behavior and characteristics and stuff like that. Judaism very much praises and exalts the elderly for that reason. So, I remember when my Uncle Mo, Alav Shalom, reached the age of 100. So, it's a big thing when a person reaches the age of 100. When a person lives a long time, it shows that Hashem is assisting them. Not too many people live to the age of 100. I remember Hacham Ovadia Yosef came to him and asked him for a beracha. It was a wild scene. I have a picture of it. That my Uncle Mo, who was a learned man, was a Hazan, was around Torah and mitzvot and shuls his whole life, but still, Hacham Ovadia was the rabbi of the generation. Came, and Rabbi Hacham Ovadia himself was old, was in his 60s, 70s, came to get a beracha from my Uncle Mo, who was 100, because he told everybody, when a person reaches such an age, he has the aura of Hashem with him at all times. It's a tremendous thing. And so he wanted to get a beracha from somebody who's elderly. Judaism very much values the experience and wisdom of zikenim. And that's why Torah scholars are called zikenim. They're called elders, because wisdom comes from age and experience. So the idea of where we're asking Hashem to assist the remnants of the house of Israel, ve'al ziknehim, and on their elders, which can mean literally elders, but also means the Torah scholars, those who are making decisions as elders, which generally is people who are up in age. Ve'al peletat bet sofrehim, and to the remnant of the house of their scholars. This, Rabbi said, excuse me. Huh?
Sofrehim is scholars?
Yeah, like a sofer sofer literally means a scribe, but that was the way that the rabbis called Torah scholars. People who were scholars were called scribes because they were around books and writings and wrote books themselves all day long. So, for example, the Rambam says when he calls a law derabbanan, he says the law is midivrei sofrim. It's from the words of the scribes, which is a reference to the hachamim, right? Shows you that somebody who is a learned person is someone who knows how to read, someone who knows how to write, someone who's around text, all day long. So here it says to the remnant of the house of scholars. Here Rabbi Sachs says that this is a reference, the remnants, those who escaped. Peleta means those who ran away. He's talking about those who remain after much persecution. He writes, the remnant of the house of scholars is a reference to those Jews who endured religious persecution under the Greeks and Romans, and later those who survived the Crusades and those who lived through the Holocaust. Judaism lost many of its great scholars as martyrs. Of course, we mourn the loss of anybody who was murdered for being a Jew, and they're all considered Kiddushim, holy souls. Anybody who is killed simply for being a Jew, genocide and the Holocaust and other tragedies that have befallen our nation throughout our history, as we say, Bechol dor vador omdim aleinu lechanotenu. In every generation, the goyim, there are enemies who stand up, who try to wipe us off the face of the earth and refuse our right to exist. So we mourn the loss and grieve anybody who does, but even more so on an extra level for the Torah scholars that we've lost. How much more knowledge could we have had? How many more people could be religious and observant today if we still had all of those rabbis and their books and their wisdom to propel us into this day? So, we have the 10 martyrs, the 10 rabbis who were brutally murdered by the Romans, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion, and they were mocked and derided in their deaths. Painful, excruciating deaths that Jews have experienced over their time, in particular Torah scholars, because the Goyim understand, sometimes even better than us, that our power lies in our Torah, in our legacy, in our traditions, in the wisdom that Hashem has given us. So as long as Torah endures, the Jewish people will go ahead and endure. And that's really the secret sauce to Jewish continuity. Of course, Jewish pride is very, very important, but Jewish pride goes hand in hand with our observance and our clinging to our Torah and to our traditions. So in here, we have a reference that we ask Hashem to protect and to help those who have survived after such terrible tragedies. But in there's also a hint to the grieving that we have and the mourning that we have for so many people who were lost over the years and over the centuries in religious persecutions. I often think there's obviously the number 6 million is such a daunting number. It's so overwhelming to even contemplate. I think somebody said if we took a moment of silence for all 6 million people, you'd be silent for 11 years to remember all 6 million people. That's how big a number 6 million is. It's a number that we've come accustomed to saying, but we don't even really fathom how large that number is. It's quite astounding. But amongst those 6 million were over a million children, and that even hurts more. Of course, any loss of life hurts, but you see pictures of survivors. One survivor today from 75 years ago, 80 years ago. You see one survivor at the Kotel with 80 children, with children and grandchildren, 80 offspring. So one person in 4 generations produced 80 people. So think about what 1.5 million children could have produced. How many Jews would we have in the world if we didn't have that experience? What would the world look like? What would Judaism look like? How would the world view Israel? It's almost impossible. You can go crazy just thinking about it. And so so much that's so heartbreaking for us as Am Yisrael. And that's why it's so important. We don't feel this as much here, but when you go to Hasidic communities, Ashkenazic communities who were ravaged during the Holocaust, they constantly preach and talk about replenishing the 6 million. That's a phrase that they use all the time. We don't hear it as much among us, even though, by the way, there were many Sephardic communities that were ravaged from the Holocaust. Most famously, in Greece, the community in Salonika was devastated. Over 50,000 Sephardic Jews were deported to Auschwitz and mass murdered. And there were Sephardic communities in Algeria and in Morocco that the Nazis reached, and they obliterated those. There were many of them. What? Rhodes, where is Rhodes? It's by Greece, yeah. I don't know if they know Salonika very well. It's possible they reached Rhodes. There were some Sephardic communities in France when the Nazis invaded France and took over parts of France. They also deported them. So it's not as if we weren't touched or affected, but all of Judaism is affected. But obviously the Eastern European lands were decimated. And they talk a lot about, those communities now talk a lot about replenishing the 6 million. Everyone asks why they're having 12 children, 13 children. Well, after 6 million of them were killed, they don't look at it and say, well, we're not going to have too many children. There's no such thing as too many children for them when 1.5 million were systematically murdered, in 4 years.
But a lot of those Hasidic, I don't want to categorize, but a lot of those Hasidic Jews, they don't even recognize Israel.
That might be. Yeah, I don't know if we want to make a broad brush. Many of them do. Some of them don't. But it doesn't have necessarily to do with Israel per se. It just has to do with the fact that their communities experience such harsh oppression. They're not going to back down from having more children, right? They're going to say, if I have a gift to be able to produce, I'm going to use it, right? And again, I don't want to get into the whole politics of having a lot of kids and whatever that might be. But the point is, you understand the perspective of where they're coming from, right? So they're looking to replenish what they lost not too long ago, right? So that's all really embedded and hinted to over here in this beracha. So I'll start again. So ala sadikim ve'ala chasidim, on the righteous and on the pious, and al she'erita mechabit Israel, the remnants of the house of Israel, ve'al ziknehem, on their elders, ve'al peletat betzofrehem, and the remnants of the house of their scholars, ve'al gereh hasedek, and on the righteous converts, ve'alenu, and upon us. So notice this beracha talks about righteous converts who see the light and come and join our religion. Again, we don't proselytize Judaism as a whole, does not seek to convert other people. We don't missionize, but we do accept and very much praise and exalt converts who do come, if they are tzedek, if they are righteous, to join our nation, to join our people. People like, when Shavuot is coming, you have Ruth, right? And Ruth accepted upon herself to come and to join the people, and she's the great-great-grandmother of David HaMelech, from whom the Mashiach will descend. So certainly Gerim have had a major impact on our nation and what has been produced in all different ways. So that's something that we also put into this beracha. Ve'alenu, and upon us as well. Yehemuna rahamecha Hashem Elokenu. May your compassion be aroused upon us, the Lord our God. V'ten sachar tov lechol habotchim b'shimcha be'emet, and give a good reward to all of those who trust in your name of faith and truth. V'sim halkenu imahem, put our portion together with them. We never assume that we are among the righteous and we are among the pious. We know they exist, but we never assume that we're among them. So we say to Hashem, allow us to have a portion in their lot. Allow us to be included amongst them. Give us the strength and the power to attach ourselves to them and to do everything we can to be included in that group. Ule'olam lo nevosh, and that we should never be ashamed to be who we are. Ki becha batachnu, because we trust in you. In other words, the rabbis recognized here that to be a righteous person sometimes comes with pushback. People, why are you being so religious? Why are you being so good? Why are you being a goody two-shoes? Just do what everyone else is doing. And so sometimes being a Jew and standing up for who you are and what your values are in the face of pushback around the world and around your society requires standing up to embarrassment. Is not being willing to shrink. Right? That's the Jewish pride we talked about. Ule'olam lo nevosh. So give our lot in with those tzaddikim so that we never should be ashamed. Ki becha batachnu, because we trust in you. Ve'al hasdecha gadol be'emet nish'anenu. And it is upon your great mercy that we truly rely. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you God, mish'an u'miftach latzaddikim, who is the support and trust of the righteous people. So you see a lot of interesting themes here. The idea of bitachon, the idea of trust is mentioned several times in this beracha, that if we seek to be among those who are righteous, we have to put our trust in Hashem and rely upon God. And if we do that, then Hashem will be a mish'an, He'll be a support system for us if we're willing to take that leap of faith and that leap of trust to put it into God's hands. So this beracha, its major theme is on the positive side of things, is asking Hashem to have compassion upon the righteous, to allow us to be prideful of who we are, to maintain our principles and our values, even in a world that has opposing views and will sometimes embarrass us and shame us for what we do. We should never back down from that. We ask Hashem to take care of all of those people who seek to be righteous, those who are surviving from tragedies, and we recognize that tragedies will occur to the Jewish people, because to be God's chosen people and to separate yourself and to live in a unique way from the rest of the world is going to call, unfortunately, negative attention to us. But that Hashem should always protect us in those ways, and that should give us the strength to continue on despite the fact that we've experienced a lot of hardship. I wanted to just mention that Judaism is also unique from other religions because we don't encourage martyrdom. What I mean by that is we don't seek out to be martyrs, right? Unlike, let's say, Islamic extremists who want to be martyrs. It's considered a praise for them to go out of their way to suicide bomb, to kill themselves in the name of God and to be martyrs in that way while harming other people. Judaism does not encourage or support such a thinking whatsoever. We don't want to be martyrs. We don't want to be in a situation where we're being killed and persecuted for our belief system. We're willing to be, if need be, by the way, which means we'll take it. Doesn't mean we kill other people in the name of God. It just means we're willing to be martyrs if it should come to that. But we never pray to be a martyr. We never relished the opportunity to be a martyr. That being said, there's an interesting story that's told about Rabbi Akiva. Right? Rabbi Akiva was one of the 10 martyrs, perhaps one of the most famous of the 10 martyrs. And the story is told in Masechet Berachot that when the Romans brought him out to kill him, and they brutally murdered him. They combed the skin off his body while he was alive with metal combs and watched him die a painful death. They did these types of embarrassing, shameful public deaths. So when Rabbi Akiva was brought out for that, the students didn't know what to do. The students were watching their teacher, their whole world, in front of their eyes. And the students said to Rabbi Akiva, give us something, tell us something in the end. And Rabbi Akiva said Shema. He said Shema before he was ready to die. And the students said, that's it? That's all you have for us is Shema? And he said, you don't understand. He said, my whole life, I was always bothered by the fact that we say, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. That we love the Lord our God with all our soul, which the rabbis means that we're willing to give up our soul for that. The question is, a person never really knows, is it really genuine, right? We say to ourselves, yeah, I'd be willing to give up. But how do any of us really know? When push comes to shove, if you ever got into that situation, how would one know? So like I said, we don't want that situation. We don't want that test. We would, God forbid, never want to be in such a scenario. But Rabbi Akiva looked at the positive side as he was about to be murdered by the Romans for this. He said, at least now I know that I can, and he was smiling. He was embracing what the Romans were doing to him. He said, at least now I know that whenever I said it and I thought to myself, I'd be willing to give up my life, I know that it was true. I know that I was being genuine because I am right now willing to give up my life. So we all think to ourselves as points that I want to be so committed and devoted to the point that I would be willing to give up my life. I don't seek out that. I don't embrace that. I don't want that to be the case. But at least if a person got to such a situation, they could tell themselves, if they're willing to accept it, the way Rabbi Akiva was, I know that I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the name of Hashem, and that in death, I will do more than I could possibly do in life. Judaism is a religion of life. We want to live out our lives. But there's moments in history for certain people where they accomplish more in death than they would in life. And those are rare opportunities, and those who have taken on that opportunity, and those who are the Kiddushim, the holy souls that died under those pretenses, they are very much exalted, and they are looked up upon by us, and we remember them, and we remember their legacy, and we hopefully try to keep their memory alive in as best a way as possible. And this beracha that we say every single day about those righteous people and those who gave up their lives should remind us as well about the great sacrifice that they made. And that should also tell us that we could sacrifice a little bit. Thank God we don't have to sacrifice that much. We live in one of the most privileged, most abundant times in history. And we live in one of the greatest, if not the greatest country to ever exist in the world. And so we don't have to sacrifice nearly what any other Jews have had to sacrifice before us. We can learn a little bit from their sacrifice, to give up a little bit from ourselves, to be prideful and to continue their memory. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.